Hello, I'm Daniela, and welcome to Prompt 3 of the Stitch the Season online workshop. This is a slow stitching workshop where we'll create a fabric book for the Christmas season in 2022. Previous prompts, as well as videos preparing the fabric book, the structure, and some of the treasures that I found to use in my work, I'll include those links below just to help you along. But I want to get started right away with the prompt for today. Today's prompt is Christmas greenery, and it's a really fun prompt. Consider all the greenery for Christmas time. There's Christmas cactus and holly, pine needles, Douglas fir, all these different type of things. And of course, there's mistletoe. So let me show you my prompt, as well as the one I created for the sample book. So the prompt for today would be Christmas greenery. In the sample book, I created mistletoe. I just cut some mistletoe shapes, kind of teardrop shapes, out of green fabric, stitched it down, and then I added some wool balls here, some felted balls, just to give the little berries. And I just think that's really cute. Mistletoe is kind of romantic and it's a cute touch. Today I wanted to do something a little different, but I still wanted to put it on my cover, or the back of my cover. I'm not really sure. So to do that, I just found some fabric. I chose a fabric piece that will fit on the cover. Because I don't know how thick I'm going to make the book, I didn't want to stitch directly onto the book. So this is a way that you could make your cover, if you found one of these prompts to be perfect for that. You can use your fabric, just cut it down to size that will fit on the cover. I'm using 2-ply of fabric because I don't want to put it through an embroidery hoop. I don't like being constrained by the embroidery hoop, but I wanted the weight of something a little heavier. So I just took a piece of muslin that was the same size and put it underneath. You can use stabilizer just as well. Now for this one, I'm not going to do mistletoe. I want to do an actual pine leaf, or a pine sprig, I should really say. So to do that, I found some beautiful colors of green, just 3 colors. I like working with multiple colors. And then I wanted to add a pine cone. So I have some colors of brown for the pine cone. So this is going to be just a stitched page. I'm not going to use additional fabric. Because it's a stitched page, I have to go a little heavy on the sketch. So it's going to take me a little bit to get that sketch. And knowing that I'm going to use it as either the front of my journal or the back, I want to kind of make it fairly flat and durable, but also I want room for text. So I'll make the majority of my image up top here. Taking this heat erasable pen, and now I just want to sketch out a little pine sprig. So I want the pine sprig to kind of just drape, just the weight of the sprig. And then maybe I'll have a few little branches coming from it. And maybe one over here, one here, and then the sprig with just a few needles and my pine cone. Just going to make that kind of an egg-shaped pine cone with the little sprig. So now for my pine branches, it's kind of interesting because they're just little straight lines, but I need them to follow kind of a leaf shape overall. So I'll just sketch some leaf shapes. And this will be the border of my pine needles. I can elongate that or make it even larger, but that's the look I'm kind of going for. Maybe a few here as well. So now I want to pin these 2 fabrics together. I'm just going to use a safety pin for that. Put one there, one at the bottom. And this just holds it together. I'm going to start by stitching a stem stitch all the way the length of my little sprig, as well as these little areas here. So I'll start with that lightest color, and I'll start up top here. And I make just a little stitch, make a little loop, and then before I pull my loop taut, I just come up here. And I'll just continue this the length of my pine sprig. You can make them whatever length of the stitches that you want. Just try and keep them all more or less the same length. It's slightly raised, but that's only because I'm not pulling it snug. I like it because of the texture that it gives. So I'll finish this length. So I used all the thread that was on my needle, and I have the lower stems here for this branch. I also realized that the stem stitch, my main stem here, isn't as thick as I would like. So before I do the upper stems, I'm going to come back in here and create a second row just the way I did the first, and I'm going to just keep it very close to the first row. I'm using the same stitch and the same thread, and I'm just creating another row to make it a little thicker. It gives it just a little more substantialness, looks more like a branch from a tree. And I'll do this the length of the piece, and then I'll continue stitching my little upper stems. So there I have the completed branch. I have the extra stitches here to widen it, and I have each of my little stems coming across where I'm going to drape the needles off of. The last thing I'll work on is that pine cone. I'm going to start with my brightest color green, this color here, and I'm just going to make a bunch of stitches, and I'll start here and work my way around. They're all going to start from each of these branches and just work their way out. And I created that line here, that little leaf shape, because I want my pine needles to go that length. And I'll just alternate sides. On some I'll do multiple stitches, and on others I'll just do one stitch, because I'm going to come back in with the other color greens that I have and continue to add little pine needles to give a little dimension. So I'll come across and fill out these stitches. Now I want my most used color to be this green. The lighter and the darker green that I have, or it's really an icier green, and the darker green that I have, they'll just be little hints, little highlights and lowlights for these branches. So I want to have 75 to 80% of my pine needles to be this color green. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's kind of the plan I was going for, what I envisioned creating this. So I'll just create a few more. Some can cross over the other. I don't want them to all be parallel. I want them to look like an actual pine branch. Just like this. I'll stitch these pine needles in green, add the second color, and show you the contrast and how it looks before I add the third color. So there I've completed the second color of green. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my third color. So this is this icy green, and it'll just add a little more dimension. Once again, I'll just add a few stitches here and there on each of these little pine sprigs, starting at the stem and just adding a few here and there. It gives just another look to my piece. So I've stitched all my little pine sprigs, and I'm happy with the way that looks. I may weave some darker brown thread just throughout the main stem just to make it stand out a little bit more. But now I want to work on my pine cone. So I'm going to take my pine cone here, and I just have like an egg shape. And I'm going to use the bullion stitch. It's a stitch that'll give a little dimension for each of the little pieces on the pine cone. So what I want to do is just draw them right now, and I'm just going to make little curved lines. And each of these curved lines will have a stitch. And I'm trying to make that pine cone a little smaller than you see here, but each of those lines will be a bullion stitch. So let me show you how I do the bullion stitch. So now to create my bullion stitch, on one of these curves I'm going to stitch a single stitch. I'm going to come up from one side of the curve, pull all the thread through so it's snug on the needle, go down at the end of the stitch, and then come back up through that hole where I first came up. I'm going to turn my fabric to the side because it's easier to work with, and I'm going to hold it down in place and wrap my thread around the needle, not taking it all the way out of the fabric. So I'll continue to wrap it around. It might take 10 or 12 wraps to get it the length of my stitch that I want. I'm not wrapping too snugly but I am wrapping so that it is secure. And then I'm just going to very gently hold down the thread, those wraps on my needle, and pull my thread. Now this takes a little bit of practice. I'm going to gently pull it, coax it into position, and then you see a little bump here. So from here, I'm just going to pull it snug, and I have my little bullion stitch. Now because I want it to be nice and rounded, like a pine cone, I could always just leave it like that, but it tends to go straight. So I'm going to just pull it snug, take my needle, go down behind the fabric, and then come up, right up against it, and make a couching stitch to hold it in place. So I come up, hold it down at the angle that I want it, and make a couching stitch. And that's the first stitch of many that I'll do on my pine cone. I'm going to knot off this thread. And the reason I knot off the thread instead of just continuing is it's a very difficult stitch and I need more work with it. So sometimes I'll have to take out my stitches, and I don't want to affect the ones that worked out well. So I'll show you one more time how I do this stitch, and I'll show you right next to it. So I'll knot my thread, and now I want to make another curved stitch right by my sketch here. So I'm going to come up at the end of one of my sketches, go down on the other end, and come up back where I originally put my needle through my fabric. I'm leaving the needle intact, taking that thread, and I'm going to wrap it around. And again, I think it was about 15 times. Then I'm going to hold it down and secure it with my finger, my thumb and my forefinger. Gently push the needle through and pull that thread so that the thread goes right through that entire area that I made that stitch. And now I'm just going to coax it into position. Again, I have a nice little loop. It's looking good. I'll stitch down here. And with a couching stitch, I'll just tack it down. So I come up and then over. And now I have 2 of my stitches. The next row, I'll have 3 stitches. So I'll continue doing this and show you how the pine cone looks when it's complete. And I'll be using all 3 colors of my brown to do that, just to give a little dimension. I'm going to stick with the darker colors on the outside of the pine cone, make fewer wraps around the thread when I get to the smaller area, and keep the lighter color, the lighter brown, kind of in the center to give my pine cone a little dimension. So there, I completed my pine cone, and I'm really pleased with the way this looks. I can remove these safety pins. Now I'm going to call this a day and just finish this piece as it is. Because I know I'm going to put it on my cover, so I have my little cover fabric. I'm either going to put it on the cover or the back. I'm not really sure yet. I'll hold off on completing this page. I will eventually stitch it around when I decide the size of the cover, and I'll add some text. But I'm really pleased with the way this came out. Right now, I'll just take the safety pin that I used to mark my cover as fabric that I want, and just pin the Christmas greenery to the page. So that's how I create my pine bow for the Christmas greenery prompt. I used lots of stitches and lots of those bullion stitches, actually a little too many for my liking, but I really love the way it came out, so it was definitely worth it. If you create one of your pages, be sure to snap a photo of it and post it on Instagram or email it to me. I'd love to see them. Use the hashtag StitchTheSeason2022 on Instagram and tag me. I really can't wait to see all your work. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.